All right, everybody, greetings. Before I forget, I'm going to flash this at the beginning today, paid for by Yana for Wyo, so that I don't forget, because it's just me here today, and I don't want to forget to do that. So this week, I want to talk about a really challenging topic, which is fascism, and specifically how we fight fascism now that it seems to have arrived full on in the United States. So we've probably all heard this before. First, they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. These words are from the German Lutheran minister Martin Niemöller, who spent the last 7 years of Nazi rule in Germany in a concentration camp for his activism. There's a bunch of different versions of this quote floating around because he actually made this speech a fair bit and he mixed it up a little bit. Sometimes he included communists, starting with a group that most people were most likely to not care about at all and to have already been made frightened of. I've heard it quoted to include gay people and a number of other groups. It's one of those quotes that seems like it's kind of taken on a life of its own. And part of that is because it's not just a powerful statement about speaking up and not resting in our privilege or our fear. It's actually a lesson in the practical nature of solidarity. So fascism is in our streets right now, and powerful forces have fascism's back. These last few weeks in Laramie, this lesson has come home to us as the local police department has blatantly told us that they will not enforce all of the laws, but only the ones they decide to. In our local case, that line appears to be drawn solidly between the white supremacist counter-protesters who have seen no charges at all, and the anti-racism protesters who have been fined and jailed. This has nothing to do with real threat. No protesters have driven their trucks into anyone or rolled coal, deliberately spewing emissions at people during a pandemic that kills people through their lungs, nor have they drawn guns on anyone. And yet the protesters are the ones being punished because we are the ones who pose a threat to oppression and who are inconveniently interrupting business as usual. U.S. senatorial candidate John Holtz yesterday bragged at the Wyoming Republican State Convention about calling the cops on protesters and how that led to Laramie arrests, and said that this was him not being afraid to stick his neck out, except of course that he was safely at home making a phone call and was in no way challenging anything. There's really nothing brave about egging on more racist cracking down during a racist crackdown. And make no mistake, the powers that be are choosing the side of oppression. And while it is easy to read Niemöller's quote now and study history and think about what we would have done if we were ever in that situation, it is proving harder for people to actually act when it is happening in our towns. And right now, it is happening in our town. Over 1,000 people have marched in Laramie, and a couple hundred are now showing up regularly for not just a one-off statement of our truth. We put up a crowdfunding campaign on the first night of arrests, and since then have raised about $6,000 for bail and other legal fees for protesters. In our small town, this is an incredible show of solidarity. I am hopeful that this bodes well for continued ongoing support to be resisting white supremacy and fascism in our town. Many people here are following the lead of Black, Indigenous, people of color in this steady, ongoing protest and activism, and that is exactly whose leadership we should be following right now. But I want to return for a minute to Niemöller's quote, which is often said but rarely looked at very closely. There's a very particular sequence to it. It's not just a rhetorical device to be sort of repeating patterns of speech. It comes actually in the order that the crackdowns came in Germany. It begins with socialists and unionists because that is where the Nazis began their persecution. We think of the Holocaust rightfully as being focused mainly on Jewish people, and certainly that is the group with the largest incarceration and death count. But there was groundwork laid before the focus turned to Jewish people. And it's no accident that they started where they did. They knew that fascism pretty much gets nowhere if people are economically secure and we're working together in daily solidarity, working side by side in labor. Capitalism and fascism are cozy bedmates because both require that we, the workers, be economically sucked dry and beaten down. We in the US have been on this track, headed for this moment, ever since neoliberalism got a foothold in American political consciousness in the 1950s. And we had not yet really reckoned with racism. We still haven't. This is a deadly combination. It is one of the reasons why the civil rights movement only got so far. Both Martin Luther King and Malcolm X knew that capitalism would also have to be challenged, or racism was going to stay lodged in American consciousness. We were already thoroughly indoctrinated into not trusting each other based on race, and capitalism was the mechanism that made those prejudices so difficult for white working people to let go of. And many historians believe that that emphasis on economic revolution was what got both Malcolm X and MLK killed. As everything becomes privatized, profit motive becomes the only relevant rule of the day. We are very used to talking about social Darwinism and every man for himself and glorifying economic conquest and the rich capitalists who make those conquests, as if the workers are the enemy of the good. Think of how Mark Zuckerberg and Bill Gates are some of the most admired men in the country, and the workers who produce their wealth struggle from paycheck to paycheck. What we have seen in terms of real people's real lives is that we can no longer afford housing and food and an education and healthcare. We are having to choose between these basics of life, and survival has been an increasing struggle for many people. When you are in survival mode, it's hard to give much attention to anything else, and political analysis is pretty far from your top priority. You are just trying to make it to Friday, literally or metaphorically. In those circumstances, we are vulnerable to being told that others who are also struggling and don't have the time, energy, and strength to fight back are actually the problem. Working class white people have been very effectively pitted against Black, Indigenous, people of color, most of whom are also working class. The fact that so much rhetoric is easily accepted by so many people about how threatening immigrants are, that they will take your jobs, that they'll bring loose morals to your community, that they're lazy, and their accents are taken as clear evidence for that laziness, because why don't they learn to speak English? This is fascism speaking the language of capitalism. Or maybe it's capitalism speaking the language of fascism. It's actually getting increasingly hard to tell the two things apart in this country. The point is that we are in a state of racist crackdown, and we are in that state because of economics and economic propaganda, along with some other things. And unions are places where people of different races make friends, and socialist organizing spaces are spaces where we talk about power and recognize the intersection of race and power that this country was built on. This is why the powers that be must keep villainizing socialism, and why right to work laws are so critically important for undermining the real power of people. Economic organizing is by its very nature something that undermines the power of racism. Frightening socialist agendas are a never-ending talking point on the right. I've certainly heard a lot of it since I've been running, and one that many liberals are actually afraid to push back too strongly against. Even if they don't like the scare tactics, every time a liberal proclaims that they are not a socialist and that they are a capitalist to their bones and that kind of talk, whether they intend it or not, they are falling into line with the framing that the working class should be powerless and fractured by race, because socialism is about working people's power, and it is about real solidarity. There's a saying in the socialist world, if it isn't democratic, it isn't socialism. Socialism means that we have a democratized economy. It means we, the many, refuse to be pitted against each other for the profit of the few. It means having a real voice in what our economy looks like and never having to settle again for the inadequate wages and inhumane work environments that exhaust us to the point of not being able to fight back. And it is actually the most direct antidote to fascism that we have. Don't let them come for the socialists. Don't let them come for the unions. Don't let them come for Jews and queers and immigrants. Do not let them come for indigenous lives. And right now, in this moment, especially, do not let them come for Black lives. If we can be a united front right now as Black Lives Matter, we can start to reverse engines on this speedy rush into full-on fascism in America. Follow the leadership of our Black siblings right now, because all of our liberation and humanity is tied up with Black liberation and humanity. This is the focus point right now of our activism, not because it's all that matters, but because it has the momentum to change this increasingly dystopian reality for all of us. Thanks, everybody.